Hello everyone, welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee today. The first item on the agenda is the appointment of chair. Do we have any nominations from the lay members for the position of chair, please?
I'm happy to nominate our current chair, Andrew Blackwell.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please? Lovely, thank you very much. Are there any other nominations? No, okay. Are you willing to accept the nomination? If so, we'll go to the decision.
Yes, I'm willing.
Lovely, thank you. There is a poll in the chat. If you could just say whether you're in favour of that decision.
Close.
I'll get my coat not elected.
Okay, there's a majority anyway, so that's lovely. So if we can hand over to the chair, please.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, let's move on to the second item. The second item is appointment of a vice chair. I understand that Tony Eason is happy to stand, and therefore I nominate him. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you. Any other nominations? No? Can we do, by show of hands, confirm Tony's appointment, please? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you, Tony. Much appreciated. Okay, we'll get on to the committee meeting agenda proper. Starting with item 3. Item 3 is apologies for absence. I've been notified of 2 absences, that is Malcolm Lane and Anne Webb. I think other than those 2 people, everyone is here, so thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest to note, please? No? Good. In which case we'll move on. Item 5 is the public open forum. This is the opportunity for members of the public to send in written representations or to address the committee in person. Wendy, have we any members of the public who wish to address us, please?
No, Chair, we haven't been notified.
Great. Okay, in which case move on to item 6. Item 6 is the action list. Very pleased we have a very short action list consisting of 3 items. We'll just take each one in turn. The first one is respect of a paper in relation to finance team capacity. I'm grateful to John Davis, Head of Finance, who produced the paper some time ago, which I've had the opportunity to discuss with him and shared with members. Are there any questions or comments noting that there's some sensitivity in the paper that we can't talk about in an open meeting? But are there any questions or comments for John at this stage, please?
I've got a question about the capacity of the team. Do you want to raise it now or when we come to that report?
Well, we can talk about it in detail.
No, my question is simply, we know that Audit Wales are going to bring the date forward for the preparation of the accounts and the audit. Are you happy with the new structure and its ability to accommodate that?
Thanks, Chair. I think if we go back maybe prior to the pandemic and the first time that those deadlines were brought forward by Welsh Government regulations, we were making good progress towards meeting those, which would have been an end of May draft accounts and an end of July external audit process being completed. We've had quite a bit of churn since that point, but I'm happy that the structures that have been put in place will get us back to where we were. There's still a lot of work to undertake to get to an end of May, because by the very nature of the work we do around year end, there's many other conflicting priorities at that time. But the capacity that we're putting in, we feel is at the right level, and will give us the best opportunity to meet those deadlines in full.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. John, kind of allied to that, there's obviously the ongoing discussions about internal audit structures and processes. Where's that process at the moment? Just so I'm aware it's obviously not on the action log, so how do we make sure we keep sight of it?
Yes, no problem at all. So we're making advances and progress in that space. I know that Jan separately, obviously, and in terms of some of the changes that we're obviously advised of in consolidating our in-house provision, that's being worked through by Jan at the moment. Jan can come in a second just to talk to that. I need to work through, as is the case for another senior role, a process of recruitment now. Obviously, as was highlighted at the last meeting, I need to make sure that we expedite that and not overly complicate that matter. Yeah, rest assured, I think as I made the commitment to look to conclude that before the end of the summer. So that's what I'm looking to undertake and complete.
Can I just push a little hard on what conclude by the end of the summer means? Are you saying we will recruit into that post? I mean, what will so advertising for that position will happen when?
So we're sat here at the beginning of June, and I would like to think by the end of July that we will have concluded a suitably robust recruitment process. Is not unnecessarily unwieldy, given the fact that we've had Jan in post as acting Chief Internal Auditor and successfully for a period of time.
So thank you, Peter. I think that's helpful. Yeah, as I say, we're all keen that this matter is concluded as quickly as possible. So thank you for that update. Back to the action list. The second action is respect of people strategy. As you're aware, this matter is on the agenda at item 15. So if we are content, I will look to close that item. And the third item is not due until later this year. So yet again, we'll come back to that in due course. If we could then move on to the next set of items. We have 4 papers from Audit Wales, and may I formally welcome Julie Owens and Carwyn Rees from Audit Wales, who are going to be talking us through these papers today. Perhaps if we start at item 7 by talking to the annual audit plan for this year. Julie, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair, and hello everyone. Nice to see you all. So I'm the financial audit lead on the Monmouthshire audit. And today, as the Chair has mentioned, I'm joined by Carwyn Rees, who's a performance audit manager with Audit Wales, who'll be taking you through the agenda item for our capital programme management review a little later. So the first item on the agenda is the audit plan. So this sets out our planned audit programme for both of our financial accounts and our performance audit work. So I'll just take you through the main points and of course take any questions you may have at the end. So the first few pages of the plan outline our key responsibilities. These are unchanged from last year, so I won't go through those in further detail. So I'll take you first to materiality. So as you know, we apply the concept of materiality in our accounts audit work. So we've set an initial materiality level for the financial statements this year of 3.6 million. So that's currently based on last year's accounts, but of course we will update that on receipt of the draft accounts later on. We do also set lower materiality levels for any areas of specific interest. So anything, for example, that might be deemed more sensitive in nature, such as senior officer remuneration or related parties. And these levels are set out in the plan on page 10. So in terms of risks, as you know, we have a risk-based approach to direct the focus of our audit work. So there's one significant risk. That's the risk of management override of controls. So that's standard risk, which applies to all bodies. And we undertake a programme of work each year to respond to that risk. We've also identified some other areas of audit focus to bring to your attention. So these include the pension liability and the valuation of land and buildings, both of which involve a degree of estimation and are sensitive to market conditions, inflation, interest rates, for example. And also to highlight in the case of land and buildings valuations that last year we did recommend improvements to the way that capital expenditure is treated in the valuation process. So we'll be following that up as part of this year's testing. We also have senior officer remuneration and related parties, which, as I've just mentioned, are material by nature and so sensitive to small changes in value. So we're also aware of a change to the senior management team this year, and you'll recall, I'm sure, for related parties that we did report last year that revised procedures that had been introduced for completing annual declarations for year end were not fully implemented or had been implemented but not fully embedded. So we'll again follow that up this year. So there are our main risks. Obviously, our risk assessment process is largely complete, but it's an ongoing risk assessment process. So should any additional risks that we feel we need to draw to your attention crop up, we'll obviously advise officers and yourselves of those later. So moving then on to the timetable for the audit of accounts on page 15. So our aim is to certify the accounts this year by the 30th of November. So, but this does depend on us receiving a good quality set of draft accounts by the agreed deadline of the 30th of June, along with fully supported sufficient working papers, and of course there being no significant audit matters from prior years still outstanding or the current year as well. So 30th of November, so I think this is an ambitious target, and these deadlines are challenging for both ourselves and of course the finance team, which John has mentioned earlier on. But we will be putting every effort into getting plans in place over the coming weeks that put us in the best position possible to achieve these. So we'll be in regular contact with the finance team throughout the process, as we always are, to try and smooth that out. And of course, we'll keep you updated of progress against that audit timetable as well. So obviously that's significant. It would be a significant improvement on last year. I also wanted to mention that the Auditor General for Wales and some of our directors met with the Society of Welsh Treasurers recently to discuss closure issues and also set out our commitment to bring in the audit certification timetable back on track, if you like, following the disruptions that we're all familiar with from past years. So the plan going forward is to try and bring the timetable back over a phased basis over the next 3 years to 30th of September by 25-26, which I think we understand is in line with Welsh Government expectations as well. And our Executive Director of Audit Services also recently wrote to the Section 151 officers, reinforcing all of those messages, but also recognising this is and remains a challenging target for all of us. So that's it in terms of the audit work. So moving on then to the planned performance audit work. So I should mention that unfortunately my colleagues Colin Davis and Charlotte, who are on the Monmouthshire performance audit team, couldn't attend today. So any questions I may have to refer back to them, but we'll do our best. So the planned work, which is set out in the plan, includes our assurance of risk assessment project, as well as a thematic review, which is a review across all councils of staffing, resources and pressures in local government, and also a local project yet to be confirmed. But we will, of course, update you as soon as we can on that. I know that Charlotte's been in discussion with your officers, and they are fully sighted of the programme. But we'll obviously update, as I said, update as soon as we can on that one. So moving then to the audit fee. So our estimated fee is set out on page 18. It does reflect an increase of 6.4% this year compared to last year. This is due to an increase in our fee rates, which is largely due to inflation and our ongoing commitment to maintaining quality standards. There is a link in our plan to our fee scheme, which sets it out in a bit more detail. I should emphasise, though, this is an estimate based on the current risks and expected audit work profile. Should this change at any time, obviously, if new risks emerge or the work programme changes, then we will, of course, update officers of any changes to the audit fee. And then finally, the audit team. Just one change to the audit team this year. Gareth Lucy joins us as the engagement director. You've met him already, and I understand he attended the last audit committee meeting. So that's, I think, all I wanted to say, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Questions or comments, please? Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the paper. I've got a few queries. I'll go through in order. Page 11 of the paper is in the supplementary paper. It talks about significant risks. It says the audit team is yet to conclude all areas of risk assessment. I presume this is just a catch-all, which you've fully written into all 22 audit plans. Or does it mean you have more work to do before in the planning stage, which would give me pause because all the work going to be done by November. John and Peter have got to give you the draft accounts within a matter of weeks now. We're getting awful tight for you to start flagging up any new things. So where's your confidence level of anything coming out of the woodwork?
No, I appreciate it. It is a caveat in there. Our risk assessment is substantially complete, but we just wanted to flag that it is an ongoing, continual risk assessment. You know, the process, it doesn't just end. But at this point, we are confident we've completed, the majority of our risk assessment in order to produce the plan and start the work.
I always hesitate when people caveat things. Everything's going along fine until you said the majority of, which means you haven't finished. When will you have finished and we will know?
We've completed, obviously we've issued our audit plan, so it is substantially complete, fully signed off, but this is to reflect that it's an ongoing risk assessment. So
okay,
assure members of the committee that we have confidence that our planning work is sufficiently advanced to be able to issue the plan.
Okay. All right. I speak from experience where I've been burned in other places where confident and majority and significantly didn't mean anything because everything fell apart the day things were going to be signed off. But okay, let me move on then. As you said, we've set an ambitious target for November for finalising the accounts this year, which moves things forward significantly from February of this year for last year's accounts. Assuming, and I'll ask Peter and John about this, but assuming they are able to give you all papers of a sufficient quality by the 30th of June, you think this is an achievable target? Obviously, you said ambitious, but the staff that are listed in the team, they're all earmarked inappropriately, and if nothing untoward comes out of the woodwork, then we think we'll get there by the end of November. Yeah,
I mean, we've said, we appreciate it is a challenging target, but we are committed to getting things back on track. Obviously, we have been quite honest with you in the past about our resourcing pressures and our recruitment difficulties, which have eased, but they are still there somewhat. But as things stand at the moment, we are confident that we will do our best, I suppose, to keep things on track as things stand at the moment.
I'm not
put
sure.
things in place.
I'm not sure that gives me enough to go to the bookies and put a bet on this.
As
Yeah.
you said, should nothing untoward come you know, to
Okay.
hand,
And my final one
or
for
other pressures fall on us.
yeah, of course. I mean, stuff happens in the world, but in terms of, yeah, okay, I understand. And my final one for the moment is, of course, on the fee, the fee and audit team page 18,
Yeah.
says fees have increased by an average of 6.4%. I don't know what the specific is for us, but it goes on to say there's unavoidable inflationary pressures, which I don't think are 6.4 this year, and ongoing need to invest in audit quality. There's no mention in there about efficiency. So it's the only public sector body in the world, I think, which doesn't mention efficiency every time it publishes a document. What sort of savings targets have you set yourselves to reduce those fees? And I know there's no profit-making element, but nevertheless, we would try to push hard down on obviously this figure, just like every other figure of public expenditure we make.
Yeah, I mean, we also appreciate the cost pressures that everyone is under, and we as you say, we can only recover the costs of our audit. We can't make a surplus, so you know we're very much aware of the ongoing need to make efficiencies, and ourselves we've been subject to cost-cutting measures recently, internally to try and reduce our own costs. We're very much aware of that. But all I can sort of assure is that should the audit fee not be used, not be needed, then it would be refunded to you as in line with the legislation.
Yeah, I'm not sure how often that happens in practice. In theory, I understand it in theory. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. Let me just check quickly. I think I have one question. That question's actually for John Davis, Head of Finance. I have a recollection that we had an issue last year whereby there was some delay in terms of our ability to respond quickly to Audit Wales queries. Can I just check in with John? Where are we with the process this year? And are we more confident that Audit Wales queries will be dealt with in a prompt manner, please?
Thanks, Chair. And I think Martin kind of hit the nail on the head really around quality of working papers, because that is the key thing that avoids a lot of that back and forth with auditors. If the quality of the information and the data is there at the outset, in theory, we don't have to have much contact at all. What we have and will have embedded this time around is a system that Audit Wales have given us access to, which negates the need for a lot of back and forth via email. And the reason that's important is that if people are on leave, if different auditors, different officers within the council have to pick things up whilst others are out of the office, then the progress can be picked up on quite easily from that system that's going to be used. So we're hopeful that perhaps some of those issues we saw last year where things were put on the shelf for a couple of weeks while someone was on leave or out of work will be overcome this time around. So we go into it with a little bit more confidence that those delays are going to be rectified this time around, Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. In which case, I suggest we move on to the next agenda item. That being item 8, the Audit Wales Capital Programme Management Review. I'll hand over to Carwyn Rees in a few seconds' time for him to talk us through the key points of the report. Then pause for questions from members, and then hand over to Richard Jones to talk us through the organisation response form and to really sort of provide some assurance to us that as a suitably robust action plan in place to address the points raised by Audit Wales. So in the first instance, over to you, Carwyn, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, I'll keep it brief and keep to the main points. But I think overall, the assurance I'd like to give the committee is a really positive report about the day-to-day monitoring. I think we saw some really good examples of individual project management in terms of timescales and budget, as well as the monitoring of the programme in more of the traditional sense. And I think the challenge to the council is what we're trying to take with a significant investment. I think is sort of 350 million. We point out early in the report over the last decade or so, is challenging the council in how it can measure the impact of that investment going forward, and that's on a program level as well as an individual project level. For example, we set out that we looked at three projects to sample in this report, where we're looking at care homes and community halls. It's looking at how that investment at the outset, what's the intended benefit of that in terms of the council's own objectives in their plan going forward, which I know have that it's a safe place and a well-connected place, which really tie into those projects. But it's really seeing, well, what measures can we, when we're making that investment, what's the intended benefit we're hoping to see in those areas? And a year, 2 years after those projects have finished, really going in to see, did we get what we intended from our investment in this program? And it's not a way of, you know, oh, you didn't get what you want. It's hopefully an opportunity then that if it's not quite getting the intended benefit, that the council has an opportunity to learn before investing the next 350 million over the next decade or so, finances allowing, of course. So yeah, but we saw some really good practice. I think it really stood out how the project teams involve the communities and the stakeholders in each of the project regularly, and involve them in the design and development of the sites to give it the best chance of success and buy-in, which I think was really sort of notable practice in a way. So you'll see we've only made 2 recommendations, each a link to the other around the points we make. One is around setting up the intended outcome of the capital programme and capital projects. And then the secondly would be around reporting on progress of the outcomes and reflecting on those. So I'll pause there for questions if that's okay, Chair.
Yep, thanks, Carwyn. Okay, questions and comments, please. Go on, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. The weird way that Audit Wales presents its reports, the summary is at the top of the contents page, and it says capital programme management arrangements demonstrate some strengths but lack focus on outcomes and impact. That's very different to what you just said, Carwyn, which is, I quote, really positive report. Can we cross out what's written in here and actually write down what you told us? Because I think I agree with what you said and not what's written here.
I think the natural language of audit, especially written, will come across that way. I think it's just a stylistic thing, and I think even in that title, it is recognising the strengths. And when you read the text in the report, we go on to balance those strengths. But I don't think it's an audit title if it's not presenting the challenge at the same time.
Well, I admire your attempt to laugh it off. But the problem is the document sits as a standalone report on the Audit Wales website, not with any contextualisation, and that headline is the first thing people will read. So it says some strengths but lack focus. And I think that's a dreadful summary of the report.
It lacks focus on outcomes.
Yeah, but it's this, as I said to your colleague earlier, it's a lazy language of A but B. It should say demonstrably shows positive strengths. However, there are some small areas which need improvement. Some weighting between the first half and the second half of the sentence is vital for a lay reader to understand what's going on, and it doesn't do that.
Okay, appreciate the comment. The report has been finalised, unfortunately, and agreed and cleared with officers, but we reflect on it as we continue to write reports.
Yep, that's all I can hope for, but when I've raised this in the past, it hasn't been reflected upon. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sarah, please.
Thanks, Cohen. I think that was really useful. I think it would be helpful. I understand in terms of a project how one might set success metrics and know what it is to the project set out to achieve, and I agree that that should always be the focus, and perhaps that needs to be brought more to the fore. But in terms of a programme as a whole, can you describe what would be good practice? I'm not entirely sure that I understand there. And also, you've very correctly picked out the capital maintenance backlog as a key risk for the authority. I'd be interested to know how we compare with other authorities.
Mm-hmm. The comparison's difficult at this time. This project's only been delivered at Monmouthshire to date, so we haven't got that comparison to hand, unfortunately. But there is a planned in our work programme over the next 18 months is a local government study that looks at the picture across Wales around capital planning. So hopefully there'll be more learning from that. Back to the first part of the question, I think some of that boils down to strategy and what you're looking at. And it depends what your priorities, what those outcomes look like. But it could, I mean, it could be around, I mean, one of the top priorities or risks and way of prioritising is the maintenance programme, and you know, where there's emergency repairs, that's on the top of the decision tree. So that's a clear priority in the strategy in terms of the decision making. So I guess it's logging then against that maybe the number of incidents where a building's had to be closed or that kind of thing to play its part in designing those outcomes of having the assets usable is obviously one of their biggest strengths. In terms of impact collectively against the objectives, that is really difficult. But I guess that would form part of the council's wider measurement of its performance against its objectives, and when investigating that, if there are any issues relating to assets that reflected back and fed back to the capital programme as is being discussed.
Thanks. Yes, I mean, I think you identified that the prioritisation process was quite strong. So I'm struggling to understand with the prioritised. If we have a good prioritisation process, how are we not looking at outcomes as a whole?
I think I can't remember the wording in the report. Clear is definitely, it's not necessarily a comment on the political decision making of prioritisation, because that is your democratic right. But we still didn't see a measure of the success of that maintenance, if that makes sense, as a prioritisation in terms of, I mean, it's really hard to see, you know, what has it prevented in a way is obviously difficult, but even a lack of incidents is proof of prevention, isn't it, on that priority?
Right, thank you, Carwyn. May I suggest we turn now to Richard Jones and possibly ask John Davis to interject as appropriate. So, Richard, could you just highlight the key actions we're looking to address, please, the timescales, and then, if possible, John, I don't know if you're listening to Sarah's question, maybe sort of provide maybe a bit of an answer to what Sarah set out. If not, that's fine. Richard, please, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank Carwyn and colleagues in Audit Wales for the report and the introduction and context given today. So the report has two recommendations within it. Our management response sets out the actions we'll take to respond to those. So with respect to recommendation 1, which is about articulating the outcomes we want to achieve within our capital strategy just set out, I think our initial response is set out the arrangements we already have in place within that strategy. I know that report comes to the committee as well, to ensure that our investments are aligned with our overall objectives in the community and corporate plan. Nonetheless, recognising the point that Carwyn's raised about can that be stronger in how we set out those outcomes, particularly around, I think, how in measurement was key in your response. So that's something we'll look to further embed in the next capital strategy, and particularly align them back to our wider corporate plan objectives. And the next strategy is due to come forward in February 2025. So that's when that will be completed. Recommendation 2 then is about reporting on the outcomes we've set out to achieve and to seek assurance and I suppose accountability that we've achieved them or how far we've taken in achieving them. Again, our response sets out some arrangements already in place. It recognises the importance and linked role between the capital strategy and the asset management strategy, which obviously this committee is aware as well as similarly just being reviewed and the supporting action plan that's in place for that. And again, how both these are integral to align back to our organisational objectives within our community and corporate plan. So in terms of the specific actions we're going to undertake, firstly, it's recognising that the monitoring outcomes doesn't just sit in the capital strategy, it sits with those responsibility holders for capital projects themselves. So the capital strategy has a role there in setting out the arrangements they should follow and the expectations on them in terms of monitoring of outcomes. So in updating the strategy, we'll set out further detail about the expectations on capital project holders who are responsible to set those out, and then include within the capital strategy a summary, I suppose our overview then using that information provided by capital project holders of whether we've achieved the outcomes we've set out. And again, in line with the first strategy coming back through, that will be completed in February 2025, and that will use existing outcome information for this year, and then clearly once that's set out, be strengthened going forward. And as I mentioned, a linked and important part of that is the asset management plan that sits under the asset management strategy, and there'll be an annual report that reflects on the progress and outcomes of that, with again due to come forward in February 2025, which is 12 months since the development and approval of the strategy. So that's how we tend to take it forward here.
So thank you, Richard. That's really comprehensive. And reflecting on what I thought I heard Carbon say, is that our overall approach is sound, and these actions are really just about refining our approach, picking up on the outcome and monitoring sort of elements in particular. But John, have you anything to add at this stage, please?
Thanks, Chair. I think Richard's covered it very well. The only supplementary from me, I think, is just to touch upon the very nature of capital schemes. They're usually multi-year. The outcomes of that investment, usually provides a benefit for 25, 50 years. So it is something that's quite difficult to put a frame around and to quickly ascertain the benefits of that investment. The only thing to add is that the upcoming financial strategy that's due to come through, Council will look to strengthen the links between our capital investment and the community and corporate plan. And I guess really get to the heart of what our capital investment over the more medium term is looking to generate, and the things that it's looking to achieve. So that capital strategy is just one of a number of enabling plans that sit below the community and corporate plan, and I think we have identified the need for them to talk to each other a lot more, and for those interlinks to be strengthened. So welcome the recommendations in the report. I think they're absolutely the right ones to focus on, and it's been helpful for us in developing the wider financial strategy that's due to come through shortly. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, John. Peter, did you want to come in there, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's only brief input because I think Rich and John have captured everything well. I think I'm just picking up on Councillor Birch's point and sort of talking to that in part. So I guess the only two inputs I would make is one, I think there is and has been an acknowledgement of some of the refinement of some of the governance arrangements. They were featured within the asset management strategy, and they play across and outside of that to both capital and asset management. And in fact, I think, John, we sat down with Nikki's last week, wasn't it, in order to almost further review that in its refinement. If we just talk about capital and our asset base, it's very easy to just fall into this sort of area of land and building. Our asset base is much more than that. You know, we've got highways infrastructure, which is very significant. John Fleet, our IT assets, etc., all of which need to have suitable, robust levels of governance wrapped around them. And in terms of, to the point I think you were making around prioritisation and a very careful balance where I guess funds available aren't sufficient to meet all of our needs. So I think through the capital strategy and taken on board, I think points made well by Carwyn and in the report, some degree of strengthening in and through and around that. The only other point I think is just to recognise, and I think Carwyn's acknowledged it, this is actually just a degree of strengthening to what is actually quite a positive picture on the face of it. Back to Martin's point, I think if we reflect on some of the big pieces of the capital programme that we've seen in the last decade, 15 years or so, so let's just reflect on secondary schools. So we built secondary schools in Caldecott and in Monmouth. One informed the other in terms of the design and the immediate evaluation and outcome from it, and furthermore into the 3 to 19 school in Abergavenny. So just recognise that fact. You know, our approach has evolved accordingly. Similarly, I guess, in terms of on the sort of renewables net zero front, in terms of what we're seeing both in a 3 to 19 school now and learning taken from that, featuring in a Meagher Undy community hub, and in other you know, acquisitions and refurbishments were undertaken. So I think to the point of evaluation of, you know, at a project level and in terms of how that's informing, you know, the capital programme as it evolves and moves forward, you know, we have evidence and practice of that. I think the point being made, I think, by Carwyn is just we just need to more coherently sort of bring that together, capture and bring that together. And I think that's akin to, I think, what Richard's talked about in terms of how we're responding to the recommendations.
Thank you all. All of that sounds really sensible and very supportive of the action plan as outlined. Okay, may I suggest we move on to items 9 and 10. I suggest we take them together. So if we go back to Julie and maybe just briefly touch upon the annual audit summary, recognising that it's mainly for noting, and then maybe just highlight the key points of the I say Q3, I'm not sure it is Q3, the quarterly update paper as item 10. Over to you, Julie.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so our annual audit summary, this report summarises the work carried out in the last year, and it's a summary really of the outputs that have already and the reports have already been reported to you and discussed by you in previous committee meetings. Just a quick overview of our financial audit work for 22-23. So our financial audit opinions were issued in January and for the main accounts in February 2024 of this year, which, as we've already talked about, was later than planned, mainly due to the impact of our new audit approach. Our grant claim work for 22-23 is largely complete, with the exception of housing benefits, which is currently in progress. The headline messages from our performance work are also included. You've just discussed the capital programme review with Carwyn, so I won't repeat that, but we've also set out the main conclusions from our wellbeing objective review and the use of performance information reviews as well. And there's also reference in there to our ongoing thematic and local performance work, which will be reported in due course. So that's all I wanted to cover, so happy for any comments or questions from you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments? Martin.
Thank you. I'm not sure that page 25 of the bundle, when it says, if we were looking back at the 22-23 accounts, the third bullet down there says the audit was delivered later than previous years, mainly due to the impact of new financial standard requirements. I was under the very strong impression that there were staffing issues involved as well. So it's mainly doing a bit of heavy lifting there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a sort of significant impact, the new audit standard requirements. But yes, we have obviously talked with you at previous audit committees as well about our staffing and resourcing pressures as well. So yeah, that was a contributing factor.
Okay.
Amongst other things, as well as other issues coming up. Okay,
and without labouring the point, we turn the page, page 26. All three performance reports, the summaries, all have the magic but word in it again. They all say something but something. All three of them do. It's an awful stylistic way of doing it. Please think about changing it.
Yeah, as we mentioned as mentioned, Carl mentioned, we'll note that. We'll note your comments on that one. Yeah. Questions?
Any other questions or comments? No, I think we're good. So, in conclusion, then, thank you, Julie. Thank you, Carwyn.
Sorry, sorry, Chair, to interrupt. I didn't actually take you through the work programme and timetable, but again, that was really just a repeat of what's in the annual audit summary, and some detail in there about in terms of progress against our key projects, the performance audit work. So, apologies for that.
No, that's fine.
That at the end.
That's fine. So I can see Martin's hand. Martin's keen to come in. So Martin, over to you again.
Again, just when a number of reports come together, it's obvious to read across the two and just spotting accuracy. And the financial audit work, the front page of agenda item 10, it says timetable of accounts to be certified by February 24. And of course, the previous paper says the timetable was the 30th of November 23. So if that can be corrected, that'll be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll note that.
Good. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just going to mention on the national reports, there's mention of the corporate joint committees, which appeared a very light touch commentary on those. And obviously there's a lot of funding that's there. So I wonder what we can expect going forward so we can monitor those.
I can take this, Julie, if you're happy with that.
Colin.
So the corporate joint committees are in their infancy, and the national study was there as they were setting up, as you say, was quite a light commentary. But as they are a duty, as they're a body, they will be producing annual accounts. We will have the same duties under the for the corporate governance, corporate joint committees as we do for any council, which applies to our duties around proper arrangement, securing economy, efficiency, and effectiveness, as well as our duties in the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act about how they apply the Sustainable Development Principle. Those duties kick in when a body it produces full accounts. So sometimes in their infancy they do a limited assurance return, which is smaller, and it's when they produce their fuller accounts that the performance audit work will kick in there. But they will once they reach the threshold, there will be an annual programme of work at the corporate joint committee, as with the other bodies that we audit.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm not seeing any other hands. So unless there's anything else, Judy and Carwyn, can I say thank you for your contribution? You're very welcome to stay, but equally, we'll understand if you've got better things to do. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's move on to item 11. Right, item 11 is the draft, I don't know why it's draft, Freedom of Information and Data Protection Act breaches and data subject access requests paper, which is a bit of a mouthful. So very grateful. I think we've got Sian Hayward here as well as Kath Evans to talk us through it. So please, over to you.
Yes, hello members. Actually, yeah, that's okay. I'm Sian Hayward, Head of Information Security and IT for Monmouthshire County Council, and I'm here to take you through the report. Now, you've got all of the information in front of you, and I'm sure you've read all of the detail of the report itself. But just to remind you that this is a report about the Freedom of Information Act and the Data Protection Acts. They're both governed by legislation, and we can receive penalties if we get it wrong. But actually, it's our disruption to our reputation and our information which is far more important to us than anything else. Most of our information is in a digital format, as everything is these days, and we are very conscious that if we lose it, that information could be quite catastrophic if it's in the wrong hands. So we like to target the changes the way we record the information, making it easier for us to extract the relevant data when we need to. We can have requests for any data that we hold, whether it's in paper format, in digital format, or in recording the meetings, I think now as well. And the requests can come into us in any sort of format, whether it's for freedom of information or environmental impact requests. We can only refuse to disclose the information if it's covered by an exemption, and we really don't want to go down that route if we possibly can, because we are absolutely committed to giving that information out to whoever needs it. We don't want to hide anything. We actively promote the Freedom of Information Requests Act. We actively help anybody who wants to come in and ask for that information. And we actively train our staff to have the same approach as we do in the corporate centre. So we actively encourage people to put in an internal review request if they feel that we've mishandled their request in any way, shape or form. And that results in me actually sitting down and going through the request with the service areas concerned and making absolutely certain that we've dealt with this request properly. That has resulted in a big increase in the number of requests that we get for internal reviews. I believe that it's probably sort of increased the number of sort of disputes that we have and the difficulty that we have in actually dealing with all these freedom of information and environmental impact requests that we get. The sort of technicality of these requests coming in is growing by the day. The number of disgruntled people coming in, getting these requests is growing by the day. But we are very, very pleased to have actually covered 92% or 95% of our requests, which is a really high target for us to actually meet. Compared to other local authorities and indeed other areas of legislation and governance that we have throughout the council. So you can rest assured that we actively use all of this information that we've got to publish on the website. We publish our statistics on the website. We publish all the information we possibly can on the website to help people to self-serve, and we actively promote the information that we provide out to everybody here. I don't know whether you want to ask me questions of detail, and if you do, then we've got Kath Evans who deals with the detail day in, day out, whereas I don't actually deal with the detail day in, day out. So please ask us any questions that you may want to have.
Thank you. Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Sian. Pretty high closure rate on these. Do we tend to find that people are happy with the responses they get? Do we get much feedback after?
People are very happy with the responses we give them, as long as the response is what they want to hear. So,
yeah, well, I suspected that.
Yeah, the problems we have is not that we're refusing to give them information, but it's not the information that they want to hear. Often they're trying to find information about how the council works, or they're they really want to complain about something. So they're trying to get that information to formulate a complaint. But we have most of our complaints, or most of the people who are dissatisfied, are vested in one or two people throughout the county. So even though you may have seen an increase in internal reviews and notifications to the ICO, most of those are from one or two individuals. So it boosts up our stats, making us look as if people are dissatisfied, but actually the majority of people are more than satisfied. And we do help people even sort of to give informal information rather than putting it through a full-blown FOI request as well.
Well, that's what I anticipated. I'm pleased to hear it. Having been the recipient of one particular individual, I hasten to add at the community council level, but 351 FOI requests in 1 month was slightly over the top.
Yes. So can I go to Rodri first, Peter, and then come to you? Rodri, please.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the report, obviously, I think we welcome the significant improvement in the requests closed on time over the last couple of years. I was just wondering about a target for the council in terms of that compliance, and is there a best practice figure? Because 95% at the moment for the last calendar year seems very good to me.
95% is exceptionally good. We do have an actual target, I believe, and I believe our target is... Off the top of my head, 93. Yeah, I know we've exceeded it, but I was thinking 92, but you think it might be 93. Yeah. We'll have to go back and check. Going back to sort of COVID days when we had considerable resource pressures, as they did in the service areas as well, we weren't doing anything like that completion rate. It's probably hovering around about the 75%. So we've done exceptionally well to improve that rate up to 95%. We really are doing well, and that is a genuine statistic, not one that we've manipulated in any way.
No, I think 95% is very good, and it should be acknowledged. That's brilliant. Thanks, Sean.
Okay, if you could go to Pete Strong, please.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of straightforward questions for clarification. I think the first one might be what you were alluding to in the previous one. You note a significant number of the reviews have been requested by a single inquirer. Are they all on the same general subject, or are they a wide range of subjects? If it's the same general subject, are we allowed to know what that subject is? That's my first question. The second question is on the data protection breaches. You report the ones you know about. Is it your sense that there are maybe a few or even a lot of others which are hopefully minor that never get reported to you, or you don't know about? A bit like crime figures, we only know the crimes that are reported, not the ones that happen but don't get as far as the police.
The ones that we've been really successful in making sure that people feel able to report their sort of data breaches, near misses. So we've seen an awful lot more reporting coming in because people are feeling more able to do it, and they recognise the importance of doing it. And that's through no great effort as the team who are constantly out there talking to people, training, advising, guiding, and making people feel less afraid to report a breach. So we get a considerable amount of, well, we've had a massive increase in the amount of breaches that are reported to us. And we are really grateful for that. It isn't that we've got more breaches, it's just that more are coming in. There's inevitably going to be some that we'll miss or people won't report to us, but that's getting fewer and fewer. As far as the single inquirer is concerned, most of the inquiries are sort of about the location, like geographical location, environmental impact request, which is slightly different legislation. without being sort of putting too much emphasis on this, it could be any subject area from that one individual. They will ask anything.
If I just come back on the data breaches, are many people sort of referring themselves when they become aware that they made a breach and they refer themselves, or is it all? I mean, I can say for me nodding, but is that rather than the victims or even other people who have noticed it reporting the breach?
We get an absolute mixture, in honesty. Generally, staff will come straight to us through our training and awareness that we do throughout the course of the year. We're trying to sort of flag that we're here, you know, should there be any issue, and let us know, no matter how small it is. So we do find that more and more people tell us about what might not be a breach, but it's an incident. You'll see that report. We report that too now to ourselves. Keep a list of those incidents, because obviously that can train. We can inform our training with those incidents. You know, the near misses, if you will. So we do get a mixture of that, and inevitably we do also get members of the public come to us and say, we've got this and we shouldn't have it because it's maybe gone out on a letter or it's gone out in an email. But generally we're finding that mostly staff will notice something has happened and come to us with it, and we're the ones who are able to go to the members of the public and say, this has happened, we're very sorry about it, you know. And so, you know, obviously on the front foot of that is much better if we can do so.
That's a healthy thing.
Yeah, very much so. And we do try and encourage that we put our hand up and we say, we're very sorry, we've got that wrong, you know, please help us to make it right.
Go to Sarah, please.
I was on a similar question, actually, whether the majority of those data breaches are accidental human error, somebody putting the wrong letter in the wrong envelope, or sending the wrong email to the wrong person, or whether there are sort of malicious, whether we've had malicious data breaches in the last year or so.
79% of them are to do with emails.
Right.
So emails go into the wrong person, and I wish I kept the statistics on this, and perhaps I should going forward on how much of that is down to autofill. You know, where people actually put they start to type, say, Catherine, and they see Catherine pop up in the box, so they just click on that person, there they sit, and then they send the email and go, oh, wrong Catherine. You know, it's so easy done, and, you know, everybody's done it. I've done it myself in the past, you know. The problem with that is, if you're just sending to a colleague and it's a very low-level email, that doesn't matter as much, but if it's obviously a sensitive one that contains personal data, then obviously it does matter, and we put that down as a breach, and we would report that and follow it through robustly, even internally. So even if, say, I sent something to a service area, so it's a colleague within Monmouthshire, depending on the sensitivity, shall we call it, of what's within that email, we would log it as a breach if we felt it was something that a colleague in a certain service area shouldn't have had access to.
Thank you. And with regard to the FOI request and the other requests, is there a threshold at which really there's a disproportionate amount of resource being taken up by a vexatious complainant, for want of a better word? And what's our threshold for that?
I'm going to hand that one back to you, Sian. No, Sian deals with the internal reviews. So.
Yeah. The threshold, there is a threshold that we can reach. It's very hard to reach that threshold, purely and simply because you have to go into a considerable amount of work to prove that that threshold has been reached. As a general rule, it's 18.5 hours spent on one particular subject area. Well, of course, if that 18.5 if that goes out to many service areas of the council, you have to add all those 18.5 hours up. And then we go back to the person and then we try and help them to refine their query to make sure that that query then can be more manageable. I would say that the single complainant that we got is tries to ask for too much information, and of course when we try and help them to condense it down, that's what the complaints for the internal review are, is that they don't want to condense it down, or they can't see how how it can possibly take that long to do that amount of work. But we've only once it's not the complainant who was vexatious, It's the request is the vexatious request. So it's not the complainant who's as a personality who's vexatious. We've only once had to apply that rule, and that was only for that specific request itself. It didn't apply to any other requests that they might have made.
Thank you. I mean, obviously there is a public duty of openness, but you get to the point where there are difficult choices made about resource allocation and how many hours of care could perhaps be purchased in the time taken to answer somebody's questions.
Yes, that is a very, very valid point for us, and it's very wearing on members of the staff, particularly when you're getting a lot of complaints about, and disputes about the information you provided. But we have a duty of care to the service areas of the council that they're not inundated with these requests, which are legislative requests. At the end of the day, we have to give them an answer.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Colin next, then Tony. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. I think I asked this question last year, but I'll ask it slightly differently this year. With integrity in public service, not at its best these days in the public perception. Can you tell me, with subject access requests and with freedom of information, are you relying upon the veracity of the information holder for producing that information for you to forward on, or are you interrogating that data to ensure that full disclosure is made?
Yes, both. We obviously rely on our service areas because they know their information best. They know what they have, they know what's there. But sometimes we do talk to them and say, have you checked this area? Do you have more on this? Because obviously we sometimes know a little more about what the person's asking for. So we're able to work with them to interrogate their information that they hold. So generally, it would be the service area who would know best what they hold. But occasionally we do go into those conversations and say, well, what about? Or sometimes we do need to go to a different service area. Sometimes, and when we're seeing this with freedom of information and subject access requests, they're becoming much more complex. So, some of those requests, and you'll see in the subject access request, that will sometimes involve the entire authority. So I have to go to many service areas to pull in that information from lots of different areas, and that's where we would get more involved with we've asked those two teams. We've asked those two teams, but now we need to go across to these two teams and see if they've got something that could complement that could go out to the requester.
Thank you. Tony.
Yeah, we've asked this question last year about these emails. Emails really are distorting the complete picture, aren't they? And when you consider the 500,000 a week, maybe millions over a year, how can that detail be not hidden, but put in the right proportion? Because that completely distorts the overall picture of a department. Really, 11 others and 3 paper records. Other than that, lots and lots of emails. So, can that be presented in a different way? It looks bad, 52, bang. But we know it's not bad. Or it doesn't look good, put it that way. Thank you.
I know what you mean, because we're talking about the number of instances of this happening is minute in proportion to the number of emails that are going out. But when you were looking at those statistics themselves, it's very hard to present them in a different way because there are so few errors in the first place. If you have an error rate of 80%, it looks massive. But if you're only talking about 80% of 5 errors out of millions and millions of different emails, we will try that, put that into a different context statistically, because I take your point. It doesn't make us look very good, whereas in fact, we are really, really good. Yeah.
Martin.
Thank you. Some of that's really helpful context. I think the issue with the 52 emails is it might be minute, but for the individual whose data has been shared, it's enormous. And so we need to find a way to, because the number's consistent, it's not going down, so lessons are not particularly being learned, perhaps that autofill thing should be removed from systems. That might be a way of dealing with it. And if we have some repeat offenders, do we have a word with repeat offenders to actually make sure that they catch those things? And my other point, Kath, my other point about the point you were making, Kath, about all the work you have to do to go and ask this department, go ask that department, ask this service area, is, are we good at filing our data, SharePoint, whatever it is, and having an organisation-wide, so you don't have to do an endless trawl fishing trip every time a request comes in, because it's all held in one place.
Yeah, so to answer that one, yes, with SharePoint Online, it is getting better. In as much as every service area has had to review what they've got, and put that, to migrate over to SharePoint Online, and it's becoming more efficient for us because they're able to just send us a link. We're able to access it that way rather than them having to download it and trawl through all different. So it's actually getting better and easier. So that the efficiency on that should and is getting slicker.
And perhaps so at autofill to stop people...
Sorry, that was the other thing. I was looking at you then thinking, I will remember what it was you mentioned before that. Yeah, the autofill, we do exactly that. If somebody's had, because we obviously track who's said things, if somebody has repeatedly had an issue with autofill, then we ask them to turn it off. We don't want to be Big Brother. We don't want to go in there and turn it off for them, which we could do. We could work with the SRS to do so, but we try and encourage people not to do so. We've also shown them hints and tips. There's ways of taking people out of your autofill, and that's a training. People don't realise that they, lots of people don't realise until they've had an incident that they can take things out of take people out of their autofill. So that's something we've put into our training now to show people how to do that, and particularly in those service areas such as social care where they're dealing with a lot of very personal data on a day-to-day basis.
That's very helpful, because in the early days of the Welsh Assembly, as was, there was one mailing list for all AMs, including the government and the opposition parties, and there were two very similar names. And yeah, that's the kind of mistake you don't want to make too often, isn't it?
No.
But generally, in terms of this report, like Colin alluded to, I'll ask this question last year, so I'll ask it again this year. What I guess we need to see is that learning from this. Now we've got a body of evidence growing. The so what question, I'd like to see sort of perhaps for next year. As a result of finding these things, we've beaten somebody over the knuckles, and we've changed the system, and things are getting harder to get wrong.
Yeah, be more than happy to show you, particularly because SharePoint will be through and embedded by that point, but particularly, more than happy to be able to show you some of those particulars.
That's really helpful, thanks.
Can I just add there that the risk element of somebody doing something wrong is often outweighed by the business benefits of having that particular feature turned on. If you're talking about sort of the autofill, for me to have to go in and individually type in all those email addresses every single time would as an operational business benefit, be awful if it was turned off. So we have to assess the risk going forwards, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we've had a very good discussion on this paper. So let's turn back to the recommendation under 2.1. I think, based on the discussion and the helpful sort of questions and answers, I think we as a committee can be reassured of the adequacy and effectiveness of these arrangements in respect of how management are dealing with information requests and breaches. So thank you. Sian, Kath, please feel free to depart or stay if you wish, if you haven't quite had enough. Okay, let's move on to items 12 and 13. We'll take each one in turn. I'll start with item 12. Those are the contract procedure rules exemptions, and I'll hand over to Jan Furtek, our Chief Internal Auditor, to talk us through the paper. Over to you, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report is to inform the Governance and Audit Committee of the number of exemptions requested by operational managers during the previous 6 months, and to identify any issues of non-compliance with the process or any adverse trends. So although contract procedure rules were written to ensure a consistent and fair approach to how officers procure works, goods and services on behalf of the Council, there'll always be occasions where full compliance may not be appropriate or even possible. Provided there is sufficient justification and appropriate approval for not following these rules, the policy does recognise this. Management need to ensure that the use of exemptions is proper and they are not being used for convenience or to otherwise avoid contract procedure rules. Exemptions are therefore administered by internal audit, although approvals are given by heads of service, chief officers and/or members of the Cabinet. Previously, managers have been invited to attend Governance and Audit Committee meetings to explain to members their reasons for seeking an exemption rather than complying with the rules. At this point, I am not recommending that any managers be called into Governance and Audit Committee as a result of this report. It is important to note that this process does only capture the exemptions which have been requested and returned to internal audit. There may be instances where officers have completed procurement exercises or extended existing contracts without following the procedures set within the rules. To help mitigate this, comprehensive guidance documents and a set of FAQs are available via the internal website for officers who conduct procurement exercises. So of the 9 requested exemptions during the reporting period, which was October 23 to March 24, 4 were returned to internal audit as required and were correctly authorised. 1 was authorised by the head of service but was missing commentary from procurement. 1 was no longer required after the form was issued, and disappointingly 3 were not returned. The comments of myself regarding the requested exemptions can be seen within the table at Appendix 3. It's pleasing to note that where forms have been returned, these contained appropriate justifications as to why exemptions were required. So as of the time of writing the report, 3 exemptions had not been returned. The respective officers were contacted on a number of occasions prior to writing the report to ascertain the current status, but at the time no properly completed and authorised forms had been received. 1 of these has subsequently been received. 1 of them is currently in progress and the other one is on hold at the moment. These were all within the same service area and it's been raised with the respective chief officer who has put appropriate controls and procedures in place to ensure this does not take place going forward. We were informed that for each of these 3, they were for extensions of existing contracts. The extension had already taken place without the approval being demonstrated in accordance with contract procedure rules, and further details included within Appendix 3. Overall, it's requested that the Governance and Audit Committee accepts and acknowledges the justifications for the exemptions provided by the operational officers. However, if committee do not accept these justifications, consideration could be made to calling in the respective officer and their respective head of service or chief officer to account for the reasons why they did not comply with contract procedure rules at the time of the procurement. I propose to give Governance and Audit Committee an update report in 6 months' time with this, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Go to Phil, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I appreciate that you've already taken measures, but can we just sort of establish, do we have any serial offenders here? You know, does it tend to be the same department? I'm not asking you to name individuals, of course not. But, you know, is there an area that tends not to comply with this, or is that making too much of it?
As I said, it was 1 service area. Within that service area...
There was this time, but I'm talking more generally.
I think in generally it was this 1 service area when we considered the previous report that I presented as well. Hence why the chief officer has now put in these mitigation, because obviously they had spoken to officers in the service area previously, and now she's putting in additional controls in place. So hopefully by the time I report back in 6 months' time, we won't have any issues.
Yeah, just one further comment, I guess, which is I think just a contextual point coming off what Councillor Murphy's just touched on, and Jan will know because he's engaged and involved in some of these conversations. So a revised procurement strategy was brought through last year. There's a discrete area of focus in that, which is obviously to look to continue to strengthen, I guess, the arrangements around compliance, the need for really robust, forward-looking contract register. And when you've got those sorts of things in place, any systems in place wrapped around that, then it provides foresight. So you really shouldn't get yourself into situations where you've got contracts coming towards an end and you're needing to, I guess, go into a process of looking to secure an exemption because you've got the procurement process, in place in train well ahead. So I know that work is ongoing, and equally, Jan's opened up discussion with procurement really equally just in terms of where some of these responsibilities sit around CPR exemptions and the like. But as I said, it's a work in progress. And if that other part of the machinery is strengthened, then it should lessen what you'll see coming through you by way of CPR exemptions.
Thank you. We'll go to Tony next, please.
Yeah, thank you. Your report, Jan. When did you last speak to the service manager about these three three requests for exemptions? They were issued in February and March. When did you last speak to the service manager?
This morning.
What assurance? What assurance has he given you?
So one of them is now with the cabinet member for this final sign-off. Yeah. And the other one is waiting for officers to come back to the chief officer with further details.
So by the next meeting in July, they won't technically appear there then? Fingers crossed. And if your fingers don't get crossed, what are we going to do?
That will be up for committee to decide. Obviously, you've got some options. You could call in the operational manager, head of service, chief officer, if you felt that was necessary. But we'll take that during the next meeting if it's required.
Well, I think it'd be useful if you said to the service manager, we're considering today, but we've held off for now.
I can feed that back, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that probably that point is well received, I think, by Jan. Furthermore, and you'll probably detect, without getting into any level of detail, that the relevant chief officer, to Jan's point, has taken on board and made changes to take effect to this not happening again. So this is, this pattern of incident has clearly been taken note of and reflected upon. Let's also highlight that it entertains quite a painful conversation because in a lot of instances, when these CPR exemptions that have been or should have been completed and are needing to be now retrospectively completed, they are having to come through me. And I am drilling those to understand as to why the circumstances have arisen and making sure that I'm satisfied that, affording the exemption is the right thing to do and also getting confidence that it's not going to happen again. So it's just to provide that further level of clarity, I guess, in terms of the conversations that are playing out in the background. But all of this comes about, and helpfully, as a result of, I guess, the lens that's being applied here in the reports that are being brought forward to Governance and Audit Committee.
Thank you, Peter. Martin.
Really pleased to hear Peter's comments there at the end. Just an observation and a question. The observation, I for the life of me don't know why this comes from the Chief Internal Auditor. Shouldn't this be a report that routinely comes from head of procurement? It's a procurement responsibility. It doesn't feel like an audit. It's not an audit, is it? It's a process which has been breached. I think that's kind of what I'd call it. And in terms of the general point, are any of these exemptions because of a lack of planning, which I think you hinted at earlier? I mean, so if they ran out of time to run a proper procurement process, so they just extended the existing, even though they weren't allowed to, is that something that happens a lot, or are we trying to get people to plan and schedule extensions properly?
Yeah, that can be a reason why people have gone through the exemption process, that they haven't left themselves sufficient time to be able to undertake a full tender process. But the exemption process does cover a range of different areas. So it could be that the item is a specialist procurement, so there's only one available supplier. So to ensure that we get best value and that we've got appropriate visibility and approval, that goes through this process. It could also be that it's an existing contract that already has provision for an extension within that contract. So again, to ensure there's visibility, instead of officers just enacting a extension straight away, that it goes through the process just so we've got that chief officer approval and oversight of it. So it's to hold managers to account. So it's a range of things. It's not just that it's a lack of doing something. that's not always the case.
Did you want to pick up Martin's first comment about authorship of his paper?
Yeah, so I think it's, this is a role that's historically been assigned to the internal audit team. We just coordinate the process at the moment. So an officer will come to us with a request for a form, we'll give them the form. That's our involvement done until the form comes back in. It's up for the officer to take that forward to procurement, to get their comments, to get the appropriate approval, and then it comes back to us for login just to complete this report and provide our oversight on the entire process and to provide my commentary back to committee then to say whether the reports were and the approvals were justified.
Without seeking an answer, because it's always been done like that, isn't necessarily the answer I was looking for.
I think the legacy and the history to this is probably in the days of control stationery. Yeah. To be perfectly honest with you, I think that's probably where it's arisen, and in terms of making sure that there is, robustness to that. It's the matter of fact here is that there's been capacity constraints, within procurement. They've obviously moved into the wider collaboration now with Cardiff, and there's ambitious program of work now through the revised procurement strategy. I think we're just being collegiate, I guess, in terms of acknowledging some of the pressures and where their focus has to be in the immediacy. To your point, Martin, I think we will get ourselves, as I've acknowledged, to a point where we will look to actually position this back into procurement. We'll just do it at the right time and when we've got the right processes in place to allow for that.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible approach. And maybe the hook in for me is the implementation of a new internal audit standards, which is due sometime next year. So opportunity to reflect on the county responsibilities of internal audit and taking a view as to whether they continue to be appropriate in the context of those standards. Okay. Just if we, by means of concluding this item, if we go back to the recommendation under 2.1, we've been asked to accept and acknowledge the justifications for the exemptions provided by officers, and bearing in mind the conversation we've had, I think on the whole, I think we can be justified. We can accept and accept acknowledge the justifications. So I'm broadly content with that. Okay, if we move on then to a second paper from Jan, that is the Internal Audit Annual Report for the last financial year. Jan, can you just talk us through the key points, please?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Yes, so the purpose of this item is the Governance and Audit Committee receive, comment on and endorse the Internal Audit Annual Report for 2023-24 financial year. So the annual report provides an overall opinion for members on the internal controls operating within the County Council and provides a summary of the work completed during the year. We identify key findings and outcomes from the work undertaken. It also outlines the performance of the internal audit team during the year against our preset targets. So as committee are aware, the internal audit team started the year with an establishment of 5.5 full-time equivalent with an audit manager and a senior auditor vacancy, so that was 2 full-time equivalents. Shortly after the start of the year, the Chief Internal Auditor, which was the 0.5, left the authority, and myself commenced in role as the Audit Manager in April 23 and immediately fulfilled the Head of Internal Audit responsibilities for the remainder of the year. The collaboration agreement, which was previously in place between Monmouthshire County Council and Newport City Council for the shared Chief Internal Auditor service, was put on hold while both councils considered their future operating models. During the 23-24 year, the Deputy Chief Executive and Chief Officer for Resources, along with the Chair of the Committee and myself, considered the future delivery model for internal audit, and a report regarding this was considered by the Committee in April 24. During the year, the Senior Auditor post was also successfully recruited to, with the post holder commencing work in August 24. So due to the planned vacancies within the team, additional resource was to be procured from an outside agency to help us meet the plan. Originally, an agreement was reached for 40 days, which would undertake 4 reviews of support. However, due to the budget situation of the council, only 20 days or 2 reviews was actually provided. However, this was deemed acceptable from myself, given the excellent performance of the team up to that time. The public sector internal audit standards require myself as the Chief Internal Auditor to provide an annual opinion based upon and limited to the work performed on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the governance framework, risk management and internal control. Based on the planned work undertaken during the year, in my view, the internal controls in operation give reasonable assurance to the Council. The overall opinion has been compiled from individual audit reviews taken during the year, which are detailed in Appendix B to the report, and consideration of previous year's opinions. Over the course of the year, the team issued 37 audit opinions, and this compared to 25 during the previous year, although it's planned that we issue 47 opinion-related jobs within the 24-25 plan, which is a very challenging target. For the opinions issued during 23-24, they are made up of 27 positive opinions, those being 8 substantial, 18 reasonable and 1 unqualified grant audit. However, it is disappointing to note that 9 unfavourable opinions were issued across the year, being 8 limited assurance and 1 qualified grant audit. There was a significant increase in the number of reviews where a negative assurance rating was provided, and this is of natural concern. It will need to be closely monitored to see if any pattern emerges. The reviews subject to an unfavourable opinion to confirm were Chepstow School, till float reconciliations, commissioning and contracts, employee general expenses, employee travel claims, children looked after savings, private sector leasing, democratic services and governance, and the pupil development grant. The reasons why these reviews are considered to be of limited assurance has been presented to the committee over the course of the year via my quarterly reports, with the exception of those issued during quarter 4. Extracts from those reports issued during quarter 4 are detailed within the annual report and can be found as appendices G to I. In addition to the planned work, a number of reactive jobs were also undertaken by the team. These are designed to add value to the organisation and for the team to be responsive to any new or emerging risks, and this will continue during 24-25. We also complete added value non-opinion work. This is shown as Appendix D, which is mainly financial advice and monitoring of the implementation of recommendations, along with the coordination of the Council's annual governance statement. During the 23-24 year, the audit team have continued to follow up on reviews where previous limited audit opinions have been issued, and it's pleasing to report that where the most recent follow-up review has been conducted, the areas examined have received more favourable opinions. So during the year, 2 previously unfavourable reviews were followed up, these being Tinton Old Station and Our Lady in St Michael's, a Roman Catholic school, both of which have now received a more favourable, reasonable opinion. The audit team have continued to respond to allegations of fraud or irregularities across the organisation, and no major frauds were identified during the year in relation to our normal business operations. The audit team have been involved in 5 special investigations during the course of the year, and details of those can be found in Section 7 of the report. In considering my annual audit opinion, the internal audit report for the Shared Resource Service, which is completed by Torfaen County Borough Council internal audit team, was reviewed, and this report will be presented to the July 24 meeting of this committee. The internal audit opinions undertaken at the SRS by the Torfaen audit team were taken into consideration. The SRS are the Council's IT providers, so assurances have been provided on the adequacy of controls in place within that organisation to demonstrate effective governance, risk management and internal control. The Torfaen audit team have undertaken an external quality assessment as per the public sector standards, and staff are appropriately qualified to undertake this work. They have deemed that the Shared Resource Service would have an annual opinion of satisfactory. In terms of the Monmouthshire's audit team's performance, as shown in Appendix G, 82% of the agreed plan was completed against a target of 80%. Excluding finalisation work, 62 audit jobs were completed, were included within the audit plan, and 51 of those have been completed to at least draft report stage. Appendix C of the report shows the jobs which were not completed in draft at the end of the year. So the majority of those have been included within the 24-25 audit plan, with the exception of council tax, which did have some coverage as part of 23-24 as part of a different completed job. So that will be included within the following year's plan now. The other review not carried forward was therapeutic practice, and that was due to reprioritisation of jobs within social services. As a measure of the quality of work produced, the team is able to report that 100% of its recommendations were accepted by service managers. Getting audit reports out to clients in a timely manner is a key aspect of maintaining our relationship with officers and ensuring weaknesses are addressed at an early stage, and the team's targets for this were met. At the end of each audit review, we send out a client evaluation questionnaire, which are returned by managers. 100% of those returned were deemed the service to be satisfied or very satisfied with what they had received. Officers do have the opportunity to discuss any concerns within the audit process directly with myself at any stage. So I can confirm to committee that the audit team have met their objectives for the 23-24 financial year. These objectives will be amended slightly for the 24-25 year to include a further objective regarding increasing the amount of and visibility of anti-fraud work across the organisation, which we will help to coordinate. I therefore ask committee to endorse this report and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Very comprehensive introduction. And in particular, Mayor, thank you for answering a number of the comments I made to you earlier this week. Before I go to members, I think it's important that I say how pleased I am personally of the great work you and the team have done over the last 12 months. I think it's a real credit to you and the team, and certainly I'm really pleased by the audit opinion that you feel able to give. That is really important, so thank you. Questions or comments, please? Going to go Martin first and then Phil. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Just to strongly echo what you just said, it's a remarkable piece of work. Given some of the staff, significant restructuring and reorganisation we've had in the year, to deliver 34 pieces of work against 20 and 22 in the previous years is a terrific outcome. Particularly since you mentioned we actually didn't use all the days that we were thinking of using from the contractors as well, which again is another positive point. So it only reflects well on you and your team. Can I ask a general question about the limited assurance opinions? Because in previous years there were 2 and 1, and this year I think the report says 8, but you listed 9 because you mentioned PDG as an extra one. That seems to me to be quite a significant uplift in terms of the number of limited assurance reports we've had this year. Is that because of a general deterioration in controls, or is it because management are asking you to shine the torch in the darkest recesses of the organisation and you've found some nasties in the corners?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a deterioration of controls. I do think that chief officers have engaged appropriately with myself and my team and have asked us to look at, like you said, those nasty areas. A couple of those being the unplanned reviews that we looked at in employee mileage, employee general expenses. The negative opinion for children looked after savings, again, was requested by the chief officer to look at, knowing full well that there probably wasn't the controls that should have been in place, but given that there was national issues, she wanted that to be looked at and brought to the front. So I don't think it's necessarily a deterioration in overall control, but obviously there's areas that need to be strengthened, and chief officers are fully engaged within that process and know to come to the team to get that assurance, and we can work together to put things in place.
Phil, excuse me.
Sorry, can I just follow up? It's just an observation more than anything else. A couple of times in the report, you refer to the work done by Torvine's internal audit team regarding the SRS. And I think the phrase you've said in here is take into consideration. I don't know what that means exactly. And perhaps in future years, you could actually put a list of the audit works that have done and the outcomes as well, because clearly we've got all the 34 pieces of work you've done with significant limiters, etc. We haven't seen any of that for the SRS. And again, it would be helpful, since you are taking into consideration if they were all listed in here. I don't need an answer for now.
Yeah, no, I fully appreciate that. In previous years, it has been listed within the annual report. The issue that we had this year is that the SRS report was still in draft at the time these became, the papers for today's meeting was made public. Hence why it's not on the agenda for today's meeting either. So that's why it's not included, because it hadn't been formally approved and accepted by the SRS board at the stage of producing these papers. So it'll come through committee at the next meeting.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's helpful.
Phil.
Yeah, you pretty well answered this question because it's allied to the previous one, and it all sounds pretty positive. But the question I was going to ask you was, when you get from a limited classification, it tends to come out better when you've had the second look. Are you overall happy with the degree of cooperation? Do you find you have to push people, or is there a readiness to climb up to a better classification?
Yeah, as with any audit and delivering of bad news to people, there can be some pushback occasionally. We look to work with chief officers and management and other officers to ensure that they're fully engaged within the process. I've got no overall concerns to bring to the committee regarding that. Everybody seems to be engaged within the process. As I mentioned, 100% of our recommendations have been accepted by officers. We try to have those conversations and be quite open with officers, that we work with them to make sure the recommendations or some agreed actions have been accepted by all parties. As you said, when reports come back through audit committee after we've done a follow-up review, generally they'll receive a more favourable opinion. So that's testament to the operational managers putting those controls in place. Obviously, if we did come back in however many months' time and reported to you there was consecutive unfavourable opinions, then it would be within the gift of the committee to consider calling in relevant officers to discuss those further as to why the control environment, in the audit's opinion, didn't improve.
And we have, in fact, done that in the past, so we wouldn't be too worried about doing it again.
Yep, agreed. Sarah, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think it's absolutely testament to the hard work of your team, and also to the excellence of service managers, given that the pressures that they are under. I was just concerned about the issue with young people's savings. Obviously, the council has a fiduciary duty as well as a duty as a corporate parent. So it's quite shocking that monies that could actually change the life of an 18-year-old are not in their hands, and that they have the skills to deal with that money. Can you assure us that that's been fixed for those young people as a matter of urgency? Which I realise is not entirely in your hands because it's down to the service, but
yeah, thank you. Just to reassure, it's not so much to reassure committee, but to let committee aware that this is a national issue with these particular savings schemes. It's not just in Monmouthshire. There are reports available through a number of different news outlets regarding issues regarding it. It's probably worth saying that the amount probably would not be seen as significant for the young people when they reach 18. We're not talking huge amounts here. But obviously, it's amounts of money that would be owed to 18-year-olds when they turn 18, of varying different amounts. We've obviously done our work. We've reported back to the chief officer. They've accepted the recommendations. They've come back with agreed actions. As I said, proof will be is when we do the follow-up review in a couple of months' time to see if those actions have been implemented and how far along we've now got to addressing our original concerns.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we look to wrap this item up. If I draw your attention to paragraph 2 of recommendation, we're being asked to receive, comment on and endorse the annual report. I think we can safely do that, and once again, thanks to Jan and the team. We move on to the next agenda item, which is the Treasury Management Annual Outturn Report. And if I hand over to John Davis, Head of Finance, to take us through the key points. Over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Not quite the graveyard shift, so I'm grateful for that one. So, yeah, this is the fourth report we've brought on in-year performance on Treasury management activity during the year. What that does mean is that it's probably a lot more brief than we've brought to committee previously in terms of an outturn report. And consequently, it's the earliest I think we've ever brought a Treasury outturn report to this committee, which I think is helpful because it maintains the discipline, I think, of having a gap between this outturn report and the Q1 report that will follow at either the next committee or the one thereafter in July. At a headline level, I'm not going to talk to the volatile picture we've seen during the year. I think I've spoken to that enough over the previous 3 updates. It's important to confirm that the activities that were undertaken for the whole year fully complied with the CIPFA code in place and the limits and indicators that were approved as part of the strategy that Council approved back in March 2023. We've continued over the year with an approach of internal borrowing. That has meant that gross borrowing levels have reduced slightly during the year by £6 or £7 million. Consequently, our investment balances have similarly reduced over the period from 25 million down to 12 million at the end of March 2024. Importantly there, I think what stands out in that top table of data metrics in the covering report is that our credit rating has deteriorated over the year. There's a good reason for that, and if members of the committee did scroll down to the table under 6.1, they'll note that investment balances have reduced over the year. So as a consequence, a greater proportion of our investments at the end of the year were with non-government bodies, and as a result, the credit rating for those are slightly higher. So it isn't of concern to us. It's simply as a result of that lower overall balance and greater proportion of those being with non-government backed bodies.
I'm sorry, John, to interrupt you. I don't quite understand the point. So the credit rating is not of us as an institution. The credit rating refers to where we invest our funds.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about investments. So if I just talk to that table specifically, we would have started the year with £38.5 million of investments. 13 million of those would have been with the highest quality credit rating with the government and local authorities. If we go to the end of the year, we would have had £11.9 million of total balances, and 3 million of those would have been with government-backed institutions. So as a proportion, we've gone from a quarter with government bodies to, I guess, less than a quarter, but and a smaller proportion of those at the year end. So the credit rating of those investments would have deteriorated over the year. But the value of those with a lower credit rating would have reduced. So it's a nuance of the credit rating system in place. But I think that the net result that I'm trying to get to is that it's not of a concern to us despite that deterioration. I think what could perhaps be beneficial is a value-weighted metric, and it's something that we're looking to incorporate into the monitoring as we go through the next financial year. One thing that has impacted over the year is our exposure to lender option, borrow option loans, so that's LOBO loans for short. We had a situation during the year where 2 of our 3 LOBO loans were called by the institutions, and we chose to repay those at no extra cost. Subsequent to the financial year, the 3rd of those has also been called and will feature as part of the Q1 update. That was also repaid at 0 cost to the authority, so that future interest rate risk has reduced for us as a consequence of that. We continue to have investments in externally managed pool funds. At the year end, we did have unrealised capital losses on those of £365,000. That is a considerable reduction from where we were at certain parts of the year due to the improvement in some of those markets towards the end of March 2024. We continue to keep a close eye on those. The statutory override that I've spoken to previously on those investments is due to end at the end of March 2025, so we need to be mindful of that. There's no indication at the moment that that override will be extended by Welsh Government, but we'll keep in close contact with them and ensure that we maintain Treasury reserve cover to cover that possible loss materialising. Just finally, in terms of our non-Treasury investments and an oversight on my part that the Chair quite keenly picked up on yesterday, there was a placeholder in the covering report for us to provide an expanded update on this. We were awaiting some figures. I think we were just keen to get this report through as soon as possible, so we didn't quite have those figures to hand. The non-Treasury investments have provided a net return to the authority of £329,000, as we can see in section 8 of the covering report. The net return overall is impacted by a bad debt write-off during the year of £217,000. Excluding that write-off, we would have seen a 1.76% return. As we look forward to 2024-25, we're expecting the position to improve, both at our Newport Leisure Park investment and also at Castlegate. Tenancies continue to improve, and rent-free periods will begin to end. So we're hopeful of giving an improved position and forecast as we come to the month 1 report in 2024-25. I'll leave it there, I think, Chair, and happy to take any further questions on the content of the report.
So thanks, John, for a very helpful introduction. So questions and comments for John, please. Martin.
Thank you, John. It's a very comprehensive report, and I agree. I was scratching my head a little bit on credit ratings as well, but I guess it's like if somebody never borrows, they've got a terrible credit score because they've never been a borrower and a repayer. I guess it's that kind of world, but I'll leave that for somebody else to think about that. So particularly on Section 8, where we're talking about our non-Treasury investments, as well as a pure capital return on those, I presume the reason we are investing on those, which are Newport and Castlegate, is not purely because we want to make money, but there's some sort of social return. do we calculate the social investment return on those assets? Because effectively we're helping create jobs or maintaining jobs in the local area. Is that something we ever calculate? Because that's why we'd invest in Newport Leisure Park and not one in London or Timbuktu.
Thanks, Chair. It's a good question, and I think the scope of the Treasury reporting on this is very much financially focused, as you'd expect. The reports that would previously have come into the investment committee and will subsequently be considered by scrutiny will include some assessment of those non-financial benefits of those investments. You're quite right that there were economic development factors playing into the original investments made, and it's right that we capture and report on those, as those investments progress. So I think the short answer is that yes, that there will be some report on this, but it's not for this report to detail those.
Thank you, John. I think that's helpful context. Just because, as you said, there were economic considerations in making that investment. They're not purely financial-based decisions, are they? We could have probably got a better return if we went elsewhere, but we made a very clear political decision, I guess, to invest in these things rather than something else. So I guess this report doesn't tell the whole story, is kind of what I'm saying, but the story is told somewhere else, I presume. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's probably worthwhile with principally, obviously, the two front and centre commercial investments, both in Newport Leisure Park and Castlegate. So the criteria that sat and that was presided over by the investment committee at that time, they had the ability to be able to draw upon prudential borrowing to make those investments, and there were specific investment criteria thresholds that needed to be met. So to your point, Martin, that was 2% return above borrowing. There was the ability for the investment committee to actually step away from that and take lesser return on the basis that and on the grounds that of it probably ticked a lot of the boxes in terms of the furtherance of economic development, regeneration benefit and the like. It's to note that for both of those investments, they were made and in clearing those 2% thresholds. So they still, and regardless of the fact that they contribute to the locality, they were still acquired on the basis of their commercial return.
Can I go to Tony first, please? Tony.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is related around to Castlegate. It has improved over the last year, but you also say in there that the majority of the anchor tenant space is now occupied. That has it been? What percentage of the anchor space was available that is now nearly occupied? And what do you really see as the way forward to get Castlegate into a positive business situation?
Thanks, Chair. So I won't have percentages on the tip of my tongue, but we are hopeful that Castlegate will return into a net return during the 2025-26 financial year. What we have, despite the increase in tenancy, we do have rent concessions, rent-free periods in place that will still impact through the 2024-25 financial year. So we won't quite reach that threshold of providing a net return during the year. Those discussions are ongoing to both fill the remaining space that's available, but also some of the wider opportunities that the site may offer and flexibilities around usage on site. So, you know, we have to be mindful of that anchor tenant that, you know, left during the period, and you know, it did leave a significant gap there. It was one of the risks that was presided over at the time of investment. So I think you know, considerable improvement since that time, and you know, on the path to providing a return again on that investment, and back towards that 2% threshold, as Peter has outlined.
But you don't really know how much space is left from the... I think it's the cleaning company that's taken over the anchor tenant, or has become the anchor tenant. There must be a big lump left, because they don't take up all that the previous tenant had, do they?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'd probably go back to the point I made to Martin, that, you know, this report is very much looking to report on the financial aspect of these non-treasury investments. In due course, scrutiny will receive an update on you know, those metrics that you've just questioned, and you know, the governance arrangements around these investments, you know, stipulate that those updates should come through scrutiny now as we move forward. So you know, won't be able to give you those percentages, as I say, but that's where those updates will go in due course.
So, John, just may I confirm that's the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee? Is that correct?
I'll defer to Peter on this one, because I've been dealing with quite a few committee dates today, and I think Peter will know off the tip of his tongue as to when these are due to come in for update.
Sorry, we're talking about the commercial investment update, yeah. Scheduled to go into Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee in September, date to be confirmed, just sent correspondence on it at the moment, just now. It's likely to be either the 18th or the 25th of September. Cabinet, sorry, hang on a minute. It's either going to be prior to the 18th, prior to an 18th or 25th of September cabinet. So you're probably looking at somewhere in the 16th, 17th, or 22nd, 23rd, 24th of September.
Thank you, Peter. So Tony, you should have line of sight in terms of that information. Clearly, if you're unsatisfied, please come back. We will deal with it offline with officers.
We're waiting to go to September for the Performance and Overview Committee. What are we expecting of the Performance and Overview Committee? Really and truly, what are we expecting that committee to recommend? Can we see things going forward after September?
So just to be clear, when the transfer of responsibility occurred and the report was taken up into council earlier in the year, I believe it was January, Performance and Overview Committee ostensibly take upon the responsibilities for performance monitoring that the Investment Committee had. That will happen on a 6-monthly cycle. It's not a one-off. It happens every 6 months.
But do we get a feedback as an audit committee of the way forward?
Sorry, I'm not following.
We've got a report here today with Castlegate Business Park. I would like to see, put it this way, I'd like to see reports coming back to this committee about the performance of Castlegate Business Park ongoing, on the back of the Performance Committee making whatever recommended route they want to take. I think it's important that we look at that.
So I guess my advice, if I was making comment to the chair on that, so is to just make sure that we don't conflate terms of reference of respective committees. So the Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee's role is to monitor performance. That is why that responsibility has been transferred from the Investment Committee to Performance and Overview Scrutiny Committee. To the extent that that scrutiny identified any issues of weakness of governance or process or the like, then they're entitled to refer that therefore into Governance and Audit Committee to look at.
This is because we've effectively put the Investment Committee on ice, isn't it?
That's in abeyance, yeah. That's right, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Phil, please.
Yeah, that is absolutely right. The investment committee was put on ice. The reports that used to go to the investment committee had all of that information in it that Councillor Easton's looking for, and I'm quite certain that the reports to Performance and Overview will as well. I know what the background to Councillor Easton's question is, and you know, I won't say what it is here because it's commercially sensitive, but I think that's more of a cabinet decision rather than anything else, because it's the policy under which it's led. And of course Castlegate has let an awful lot of its space now, and of course a lot of it's been remodelled as well, so it's not the same animal as it was. Just one point to add to what Peter said earlier, in response to Martin's question. When we, because I was on the original investment committee, when we did kick that off, that was to try and earn some money to supplement the amount of money that we were getting in grants and other income. But we did, in fact, do one, well, definitely one Broadway Partners. That was definitely with a view to improving the lot of the residents of Monmouthshire, and that was pretty well the sole purpose of doing that.
Thank you, Phil. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so in conclusion, may I say thank you, John, for the paper. It's really helpful. Do appreciate the amount of detail that this paper contains. And in terms of, you know, what this committee's position is, I think we can be assured over the arrangements in place to manage the Treasury strategy, policy and performance. So thank you once again, John. We'll now move on to item 15. Item 15 is people strategy. If I may hand over to, as Matt quickly runs down to the front, possibly. Okay. Let me read out your job title, Matt, because that'll take me half a minute. So, Matt Gatehouse, Chief Officer, People, Performance and Partnerships. So, once you set yourself, please introduce the paper.
Thank you very much, Chair. And you got that right first time, which is more than I normally do. Sorry, bear with me a moment, committee members. I'll just pop my my screen up and make sure I've got the report in front of me. Right. Yeah, so there we go. Apologies for that delay. So just a reminder, the people strategy is part of the suite of enabling strategies we have as an authority, alongside things like the finance strategy, which is currently being developed, the asset management strategy and plan, and our developing digital and data strategy. So together, those all sit underneath the community and corporate plan, and if working effectively, ensure that all of the different resources of the authority are aligned and delivering the purpose set out within the community and corporate plan approved by Council. So specifically on the people strategy, the intention is that it creates the framework to support and develop our colleagues so that they're maximising their contribution to those objectives. So it's before you today, as sort of requested previously by the committee, to enable you to seek assurance that as one of our enabling strategies, our people resources are able to be effectively deployed with sufficient sort of clarity and direction. So to just sort of talk a little bit about the strategy itself, and probably it'd be remiss of me as Chief Officer for people not to sort of start with a comment, as you would all expect me to, that actually we're incredibly lucky to have a sort of dedicated and hard-working colleague base in Monmouthshire. You know, we genuinely have people working here on our sort of payroll of 4,100 that continually sort of go the extra mile in the service of those within our communities. But we also have to recognise that we're in a tight employment market, and that we're competing for talent and skills with many organisations out there. And we need to work really hard to make sure that we do continue to remain an employer of choice, attracting people within the local authority sector, but equally beyond as well. So during the development of this strategy, we've been out and about talking to officers, not everyone, but a cross-section of teams, from those who are office-based to those who are frontline, to understand, sort of try and understand some of the realities of their working lives and get a sense of what they need to thrive and succeed in the workplace. And some of that is included within the strategy. And let's just try to find the page number. But you'll see that, I think, on, where are we? If I just scroll down, page 7 of the strategy itself. So that sort of sets out a mix of the sorts of things which colleagues have told us, but also which are very prevalent in the academic research and sort of multiplicity of studies that have gone on in the field of HR. So that, that's things like autonomy, the freedom to make decisions, express creativity, and sort of navigate work with a sense of control. That sense of purpose that people have. They understand what they're working towards and trying to achieve. So those are things you'll see coming up a lot in the sort of literature and research. And that goes down to really some of the issues that have been surfaced quite clearly by colleagues in frontline roles, such as the tools to do the job. We have a lot of colleagues out there working in quite challenging conditions. If you think about it, when the likes of me are sat in front of a laptop in a warm office in December and January, we have home carers out there moving around the county, knocking in front doors in driving rain. We have people out there repairing barriers on the roads and filling potholes. So, yeah, the needs of colleagues differ, and it's important that we make sure that they have the tools to do the job. So you'll see a sort of broad set of things there that we need to make sure we have in place. The strategy itself then puts in place 6 different objectives, which you'll see on page 8, that align with those. So things like a clear purpose supported by an enabling culture where colleagues have the information they need and are empowered to make a difference to the people we serve. You can see those. I'm not going to sort of read them out and run through them verbatim, but what you see down the left-hand side of that diagram is that together these should put in place both all the culture, the capacity, and the capability in our workforce, and align all of that together and enable people to make a contribution to the communities we serve. So those objectives are then delivered through a series of actions, which you'll see on page 10 onwards. Now, you'll see a note at the beginning of that action plan. That is not a finished product, because it will never be a finished product, because the world is continuously changing. You know, we reference here the future of work. You know, that's a really challenging area for us as we begin to grapple with both the potential and the challenges of things like generative artificial intelligence. The challenge of making sure that we maximise the potential of that for colleagues in productivity, well, making sure that decisions that affect human beings out there in our community are taken by human beings inside our organisation rather than by algorithms, because we know the challenges that can come with that sort of approach, which often will come with the inherent biases that we've seen sort of historically exist within our society. So the element of the human runs strongly through that. But I'll just pick up, if I may, Chair, and just highlight a couple of the actions. So amongst the things we're working on at the moment and be launched fairly soon will be the authority-wide rollout of a new e-learning platform. And if I think specifically about the role of this committee and your interest in this, one of the things the e-learning platform will make sure we do is as well as providing a platform for colleagues to access the training they need to do their jobs now, the essential skills for the jobs they're in, it will provide a space for the development opportunities they will need to really us to keep hold of them and make sure they can work towards the next and the job after that in their career. In terms of assurance, the other thing that system will do is give us a higher degree of confidence that all of that mandatory training is in place, because it will be all recorded in one place, linked into our payroll system, Resource Link. So each employee's record will say, if you were supposed to have done health and safety training, it will show on your record. If you're supposed to have done, actually as all of us do, safeguarding training, it will be on your record, and we'll be able to report more accurately, directorate by directorate, that colleagues have the training in place that they should do. One of the other actions in there, again, to be launched fairly soon, is the rollout of an e-recruitment system. That does two things. It should make the attraction of candidate and the onboarding of candidates an easier process for them, making it, increasing our likelihood that we'll be recruiting the very best people. But secondly, what that does is it takes away the double and triple entry of information. So we're not looking at application forms and keying that into a payroll system. The application form is moved by a series of sort of connectors and digital connections into the payroll system. So all of the information flows. So at the moment we call them e-forms in a lot of cases. They look like e-forms, but actually they still involve a lot of manual processing. This is building in a more sort of seamless process of automation in our sort of use of that information. And just sort of one more example. The other thing which is highlighted in here is a new performance appraisal system for our colleagues. We have a scheme in place at the moment, but we've been listening to feedback from colleagues and managers, and it isn't performing as well as we would like in terms of creating that sort of golden thread from the objectives of the organisation through to the individuals. And the other thing that scheme will do, link back to my first point, is give us far greater knowledge of the development and training needs of our colleagues, so we can use that to inform a better training needs analysis and target our training and development more effectively to make sure that we have the workforce, again, that can do the job they're employed to do now, but also which is fit for the future. And then on page 9 of the strategy, you can see a table which highlights, if we get all of this right, what it should look and feel like for the individual employees, for leaders, for the organisation, and then most importantly for those in our community. And that just attempts to sort of bring that all together. And just by means of conclusion, I think, again, you would expect me to say this, our people genuinely are our most important asset. Of our circa £200 million revenue budget, around 100 million of that is payroll costs. No matter what I do or Richard does or Peter or Jan on any given day, we are only a tiny fraction of the overall contribution delivered by 4,100 people, and we need to get all of that working in the right direction and making sure we have the conditions in which those colleagues can thrive and succeed. So, Chair, if that's all right, I'll sort of pause there and open it up.
Yep, of course. So if I may, thank you for the paper and the helpful introduction. As you said, this is a very important strategy which needs to be clearly and robustly implemented, because, as you quite rightly say, people are our most important resource, and we can't squander the talent we clearly have within the organisation. If I go to questions, I'll start with Tony, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matthew. 3.5, a little bit confused. We've increased the size of our workforce over the past 10 years, but our employee budget has only gone up by 1%. The increased staffing has been afforded by grants for special projects. So the special projects will provide the salaries for those people who were on temporary contracts. Is that correct? And how does that relate to the fact that your permanent staff, you've only seen your budget for permanent staff, you created by 1%. I don't quite understand. I can understand what you're trying to say, but I'm not sure I understand the outcome.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good point. And looking at that again, I don't think I phrased that paragraph as clearly as I could have done in the report. So there's a couple of different things here. If we look at it from the point of view of the employee, pay increases in local government have gone up by less than inflation.
Yeah.
And for colleagues, that means they've seen a real term erosion in their pay. Now, that's not unique to local government. That's been experienced in many sectors. But for a lot of our colleagues, we have a lot of people in relatively low-paid jobs, and that creates challenges for them. We've also seen increasing use of grant funding coming from UK and Welsh government. That has meant that increasingly, both some projects which perhaps our politicians may not chosen to prioritise locally have been prioritised because we're pursuing national policies and priorities. So as our core staffing group has been constrained by declining sort of in real terms settlements, revenue sort of grant settlements, we've seen almost an expansion of that part of the workforce which is paid for by grant. And that comes with costs because colleagues like finance and HR are supporting more temporary contracts and turnover of people who are coming in on short-term grant-funded projects. But actually that core staffing hasn't increased. So yes, the workforce overall has grown because we've seen a lot more people come in on grant-funded posts. When John Davis and colleagues put together the budget at the start of the year, if you look at that, what you see is the employee costs don't feature grants. They feature as income somewhere else. So that core employee payroll cost isn't going up. So we're seeing a lot more funded from these grant lines. But of course, the ongoing risk of all of this for employees, it means we have more people on fixed-term contracts, which doesn't give the stability that they need. Sorry, did I knock the microphone off? A more considered approach to recruitment as we have dealt with the need for financial recovery in year. And one of the things that highlighted to me in my role is actually there are a lot of grant posts now which are grant funded that I thought would have been core budget. And that creates that increasing risk that as these grants fall away, some of the things we've come to depend on as core activity become stretched and challenged. So I hope that sort of goes somewhere into probably sort of elaborating a little more on my poorly worded paragraph.
Does it mean then that we got a block of staff actively seeking projects to get grants from to keep themselves in employment?
Not really, no. Most of the staff employed in those jobs wouldn't have a direct role in applying for those grants. We have a very small number of people that would be involved in grant application, so there wouldn't tend to be an overlap of the two.
A lot of active travel projects going on. They're I think Welsh Government funding, and it seems to me that one sustains the other. And how long is this sustainable for?
So I'm not sure it's a question Matt's able to answer, but I think it's a fair point. Yes, agreed. It's a fair point. But I don't think Matt's able to answer that question. Agreed. Could we move on to Sarah, please?
Thanks, Chair. Matt, I think this is it's a lovely strategy, and it clearly captures the process that you've gone through of asking people what matters to them in their workplace. So I think that's great. Couple of things that stood out to me. One, there's very little mention of pay. I mean, I know everybody in Monmouthshire works for love, but I know you've also identified elsewhere that competitiveness in pay is an issue in recruitment. And also, you're saying in terms of the age structure, we have an issue in that we have an experienced workforce. Does that mean that we have a lot of people at the top of their grades and people coming up for retirement? You've given us a median age of the workforce as a whole, but I'm not sure what age people are generally retiring at, and what I observe is people going part-time in that run-up. Does that create us issues? And that you've raised the point that we've got above average sickness, but there didn't seem to be an action plan to deal with that. So from this committee, which is, concerned with the statistics and pounds and pence, there seem to be a few things perhaps lacking.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for the question. And generally, this is the value of coming to this committee, because it adds that additional lens into that. And one of the things I would stress is that the action plan will continue to evolve. So yeah, if I just sort of come back and work through some of those. Not enough mention of pay, quite possibly. As you know, we're part of sort of national collective bargaining structures. So we're sort of fairly limited in terms of our own actions around our ability to influence pay. One thing we do have that probably doesn't come out here, and which probably would benefit from a mention in the action plan, because we will keep that updated, is the role of our job evaluation scheme. Because actually, while we can't affect national pay bands, national pay structures, we have some control over how local jobs are built, and the sorts of the ability really that as jobs evolve to ensure that we keep those job roles under review, and as people take on different and more complex work, from time to time those jobs are re-evaluated to reflect the changing nature of that role. And that's possibly something that could be better reflective how we continue to do that through workforce planning. Because I think some of the analysis makes reference to the fact our workforce planning perhaps isn't as effective as it could be, but there isn't an accompanying action to strengthen that. So what I will do is work with the Cabinet member, Councillor Callard, and ensure that's more strongly reflected in the action plan. Next point then, if I sort of pick up your one around age structure and retirement. You're absolutely right, and this came out very strongly actually in one of the meetings we had with frontline colleagues. And this particular group happened to be generally refuse, cleansing, highways. In this particular instance, it was a predominantly or exclusively in that room male workforce. But their point wouldn't have been limited to males in job. It would equally apply to home care, those doing manual handling, which is actually in those roles, and it will be different for all of us, but you may get to a certain point in life where you're no longer able to do the physically demanding roles, but still have a huge skill set and contribution to make. And one of the things we need to work on and get better at through our approach to colleague development is making sure they have the opportunity to learn new skills and transition into different roles, so we can continue to keep those individuals in the organisation contributing when perhaps they may no longer be up to, for argument's sake, lifting heavy things on the road, filling potholes, lifting bins, but still have phenomenal contributions. And so that's one of the big challenges through the workforce development piece, and it is linked into that age structure. Finally, on sickness, again, it's a fair point. We are working on quite a few things here around our colleague wellbeing offer. We've got a really, I would say, strong suite of support offers for our colleagues. Through at one end, what we have a go-to group, which is colleagues who make their mobile phone numbers available if someone's just feeling a bit of pressure and wants to unload to someone outside their management structure. through to a contracted counselling service where colleagues can be referred through for 6 weeks for them free counselling sessions. So we have a real range there, but what we don't always do as well as we could is promote it and make sure that everyone understands that range of benefits, particularly for colleagues who are out there and don't have ready access to a laptop or the hub where the likes of us sort of sat at this end of the room would normally access our materials. And that's something we are working on at the moment, how we make that sort of material more readily available to those colleagues and promote it, because those are the things which help us reduce those absences in the first instance and then get people back to work quicker. You know, the effective occupational health service and referrals that can support people. And it's things like making reasonable adjustments when people return, perhaps after surgery or after an illness, to get them back in the workplace with adjustments quicker. So again, yeah, thank you very much for the question, Councillor Birch. And I think there's a few points there we'll go away and make some refinements to the action plan.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks. Go to Peter next and then Martin. Peter.
Yeah. Thank you. One thing I'd like to see in the strategy is some reference to our role as employers of members of the armed forces community. 2 years ago, we were Welsh Armed Forces Employer of the Year. We are currently holders of a Gold Award as Armed Forces employers, which is up for renewal soon. So it would be useful to have some reference there. I mean, things like our commitment to give a guaranteed interview to any veteran or somebody soon to leave the armed forces who reaches the minimum requirements for a job. Perhaps our role in being sure we can release reservists, a recognition of the skills that members of the armed forces bring with them, so that we actually use those. So I'd like to see more reference to that in the report, if that's possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Martin.
I'd fully support Peter's comments on that. I mean, that's not. I mean, we've clearly done that in the past, and I think it just needs to be captured in this. Echoing earlier comments, what staff want is about pay, it's about recognition, and it's about flexibility. I've heard we talk about pay. Recognition gets mentioned in here. The flexibility stuff doesn't really, and work from home is not a phrase that exists in this document, except perhaps buried under the reduce our carbon footprint section. Is that a hint that we're trying to tell everybody to stay at home if possible? Because I couldn't quite, apart from that, there's no other mention about sort of where people are actually going to be working, so that would be helpful. You mentioned on page 12 in the action plan, gender pay gap. Some organisations are moving beyond that and looking at ethnic pay gap, disability pay gaps. Those kind of things are really sort of, if you want to be forward and progressive, they're the kind of areas you need to look at as well. And finally, I had a voicemail at the bottom of page 14 when you said undertake an audit of our culture, because that's a hot topic right now. I mean, you've seen what happened in South Wales Fire. Effectively, the organisation has pretty much ceased to exist as an organisation because of its cultures. And whilst I don't for a second think we're in that space, I'm not sure we can wait till March 26th to find out. So I just suggest if we can do something earlier than that, we do.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, I'm not seeing any of you. Do you want to come back on any of those points, or are you happy just to take them away?
You just came back sort of quickly on particularly that last one, the point around culture, because that's really important. And what I would want to stress is that doesn't mean we're not going to do anything until that point in time. And actually prompted by one of the examples you mentioned there, myself and the chief exec sat down and we worked through all the different pieces of evidence we have. In fact, internal audit did a piece of work a couple of years back on culture, and what we recognised we need to do. It didn't feel to us like we were in that place, but how do we know? We've got lots of bits of evidence, but they're sometimes in different corners. And what we recognise we've got to do is put all of that together so we can be absolutely confident that this isn't happening on our watch. We're confident, but we don't know for absolute certain. We need to do more to bring all of that evidence
The now ex-chief fire officer also didn't believe he had an issue either, so yeah. Can I just say one more thing? I did forget. I'm sorry, Matt. Terrific response earlier on talking about well-being, counselling, and yet high levels of sickness level. Are we sure we're not a soft touch as well?
Well, I guess this is where our HR team, our managers have to work hard to ensure we have all of the processes in place. You know, everyone that goes off on their first day back, they should be having a return to work interview. That return to work interview needs to be recorded. Actually, I had to input some sickness absence for a colleague today. You can't close that until you've confirmed the date of the return to work interview that's been undertaken. Because actually, the very nature, evidence suggests that if someone were to be off for a day, but when they come back, they've got to sit down with their manager and talk about that, it leads to more sort of accurate reporting and ensuring that people are only off in genuine circumstances. I've not seen any evidence to suggest we're an easy touch, but we do need to keep that that under continuous review to make sure that remains the case, and our HR business partners supporting managers to do that.
Okay, I think we're about done. Can I say once again, Matt, thanks for the paper. Clearly, based on the questions you've heard, we are very much engaged in this topic and very supportive of the work being done to implement this strategy at pace and in a robust manner. Just one question from me. In terms of the action plan, how will that be overseen? Is that via chief executive and officers, or will it go to, for example, one of the scrutiny committees? Because I'm very keen that there's some proper oversight.
Yeah, thank you. Good question, because actually I didn't cover it. So the intention is that anything which is sort of corporate business in terms of our scrutiny committee structure would be the responsibility of performance and overview. So we've got people, place, and performance and overview, as well as public services chaired by Council Watch. So it would fit, and we would make reports available to performance and overview scrutiny committee.
Okay, that'd be very helpful. If that can be assured, that'd be fantastic. Okay, in conclusion, I think we're generally supportive of a strategy and look forward to those actions, which all appear sensible to be implemented as soon as practicable. Okay, we're on the home straight. Let's have a look. Item 16 is a forward work plan. I'm not going to spend any time looking at it simply because the meetings in July have been rearranged and Peter Davis kindly taken the action to rebalance and resequence those papers. So we'll just move on. The minutes, as usual, are very high quality. I've reviewed them. I'm happy with them. Yet again, I'm not going to go to a vote unless people shout now that they're unhappy with any content. Good. And finally, item 18, date of next meeting, clearly now it's 10th of July at 2 p.m. So once again, there's been a bit of a marathon session. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your contributions from both elected members, lay members, and of course, officers. Thanks one and all.
Thanks all. Ciao.